And good morning, everybody. Welcome to Jet Radio 1400. I'm your host, Alan Carpenter. This is the half hour we spend almost every week with Josh Skarzinski from Stan's Garden Center. How you doing this morning, Josh?
You really got to know the foo if you're going to know that's the foo. That was like 4 notes.
Yeah, that was these days.
Yep.
These days. And you know, we were talking off air about what we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about these days because no matter who you are, people are talking about the weather this week. We had that long drought, and now we've had a couple soakers. And we've also had, and keep in mind it's the middle of June, it's fairly cool out there. When I leave for work at 4:30, it's like 51 degrees.
Yeah.
Not entirely normal.
I know that other parts of the country have accumulated our heat, like whatever we would normally have. They took it away, and unfortunately, it's in areas that is creating, tragic smoke on occasion, which I guess that hasn't been remedied by any of this weather at all. But for the local gardening, the cool and the kind of darker and the good soaking water. Like a lot of times I see, like the lawn sprinkler run for 20 minutes. That doesn't do it. When we've had a couple like this that have, a long inch of rain, deep cycle of water, that's really good for things. So if you want to talk about what has changed with the garden side, I cringe when I see folks out spraying a lawn when it hasn't rained for 21 days and trying to get weeds or fertilizers and such, because that can do more harm than good when we're in a drought state. So now that you have good ample water, cool growing temperatures, that would be the time now to go on in with if you want to use the Scotch product, that would be like step 3. You're now seeing green coming back. You're seeing all that new lush growth coming because there's a deep, thorough water. Now would be the time to come in if you want to add like step 3. I love step 3 and some of the greener products midsummer because it has iron in it, and that like 1 or 2% of iron is miraculous at making the lawn almost fake looking dark green. Instead of that green. Instead of that yellow kind of light green, you get that really rich dark green when you add that step 3 or that iron supplement product. You don't want to feed any plant that's in a drought strike. So whether you have a hanging basket, a window box, a lawn, a shrub that you put in that got drier, anything that is that has seen a drought strike, you don't want to add fertilizer to it and say, "Ooh, it dried out. I want to help it pick back up." And you don't want to do that because those are salts and minerals, and salt draws water away. So when you add salty water to dry, it actually has a tendency to burn those fine little white root hairs that are hanging on by a thread if you're in a drought strike.
It's kind of counterintuitive, though, because most people would say, hey, man, this plant is, we got to give it extra food. We got to give it extra nutrition. That's where people run into trouble.
Yeah, so even if you're going to want to feed in kind of the beginning of a drought or something, go ahead and give it a good couple hour watering. I'm referring to the lawn again. Give it a good, deep, thorough watering, and then apply those minerals, and those minerals will be well received and have an uptake. If you put down anything fertilizer-wise on a dry plant, you're liable to see a detriment. So that being said, what's going on right now, you're seeing that flush of green. You're seeing that those lawns returning. On the flip side, if you want to do selective or non-selective herbicides, like say you have cracks in the sidewalk, your driveway or whatever, that material dies very slowly if products like triclopyr and glyphosate and stuff, your typical over-the-counter weed killers, they could take weeks, if not a month, to die a slow death when it's in drought state because they don't grow that fast. And how these materials work is they block internally in the plant, they block the ability for that plant to do functionally what it needs to, so it in essence grows itself to death. Well, then flip back, if it's in a drought state, it's in a preservation mode, things are just hanging on, waiting for water, they're not growing very quickly at all, and there's things that are basically like windows inside a plant's leaf called stomates, and those stomates, the windows stay closed. That's the breathing effect of a plant. That's where the gas exchange occurs. Well, in essence, those windows stay closed, so they don't receive any of this growing function that makes this weed killer work. So whether it is a selective herbicide to kill an unwanted weed in the lawn, which selects only to kill dicots, things that are multiple leaves, like your clover and your dandelions and things like that, it has to be growing actively to die. So my tidbit, for the day, as far as growing, is you can go ahead and go back to feeding, and when you feed, then you can go ahead and use selective and non-selective herbicides because they're going to functionally work because now the plant's got back to growing, it's pulling nutrition. So instead of seeing a response from that herbicide in say 3 or 4 weeks, you'll see it in 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
So that's now on the growing side, being that things have picked up and started to run again. I kind of have a unique stance or a kind of point as to this point in the gardening industry. We have seen so much cool and so much atypical.
That's exactly what I want to ask about. Yeah.
For the gardener, it is still in essence, and even going forward next week, there's going to be some moisture and some cooler nights as well. It is not this switch to hot temperatures. Even though we had like 20 days without rain, with a little bit of help and irrigation, it is not that 90-something windy, scorching, really hard on plant material. Plant material, in essence, when I was in college, they basically told us most all plant material shuts down and goes into preservation mode between 84 and 86 degrees.
Right.
It's not actually doing it any good. Like, we'll get it really warm, we'll get it hot. Plants love that. It's not actually the case. They do better to take in this kind of casual, especially if you're planting a container-grown shrub, annuals, anything. It does better to recover on the bottom side, meaning your root system, if it's not stressed out on the top side by hot, scorching sun.
Okay.
So my kind of plea is, this is still spring. It is perennial time. It is trees and shrubs time. It is still giving you the weather trend to go ahead and finish off that project. There's no need to wait for another season to roll by. You're still getting really this is my gardenable weather. So the perennial crop that we grow, all the perennials in-house, when you are out and about and looking, you're starting to see things, and I kind of have a point to this, like the Asiatic lilies and the hemercalis, the daylilies. You're starting to see things like a stilbea, that false spirea, that nice plumy material that grows in the shade. You're starting to see those in their glory as far as what their use is in the landscape. Those plants are on the bench for you to kind of shop through. I say, if you're a perennial, maybe you were a lot of annuals, you put in a lot of geraniums, and then now you're deciding, well, I just don't want to do all that maintenance, or, like you and I, we're getting older, I don't want to plant that much. I want to take up some area with perennials. I tell folks to frequent shop. And it's not just to get you in the store, it's to help you design your garden. It's the easiest way. When you walk through the garden center in, let's say, the end of March, beginning of April, what's shining, what is blooming, what is saleable, whether you have Lenten rose and your English daisies and your creeping phlox, and all that material in the perennial world is interest early. You're not, if you only came in that time of year and said, I want to plant a perennial garden, well, you really don't notice what a stilbea looks like in its bloom, what that daylily or that hemercalis is going to look like in bloom, whether you want the finer leaf reblooming style like Stella d'Oro, Stella Supreme. They have a little bit of a tighter clump and smaller, finer leaves than the old-fashioned traditional daylily that has a large bloom, wider leaf. I kind of tend to mix them together because one has different timing a little bit, has a much more higher posture, much more impressive stop traffic bloom to it, but they don't continue to rebloom. So as you're Stella kind of picks back up later in the summer, that other one, you could cut the bloom right back and it's just green leaves. So I like to mix them together so you get the wow and the longevity both. So when you are looking at the perennial, I kind of call this perennial season because everybody made a big mad dash to get their vegetable garden in. They get their annuals, they get their hanging baskets. That's the early because we feel under the gun and a lot of pressure in Erie because we feel like our growing season's like 6 days long. So now, okay, we can come back and visit that perennial garden in order to see what that plant is doing. So you can walk through and then don't rule out, say like, the end of July, the beginning of September. When we would lay out a perennial garden design, it would have something of interest in early, mid, late mid, so that when you come and say, okay, you don't want everything to just look tattered and tired come September. You plant some sedums, some upright sedums, things that have really good fall, autumn color. And when you frequent shop through that perennial garden area, that gives you the visual presence to say, I like this, I don't like this, that doesn't go with my garden, that's too high, that's too short. You get to see a little bit of that. So I say this is perennial season. Come on in and take a look at what those perennials have to offer. So a lot of times, I always try to throw vocabulary your way. Someone might be actually listening. I should pause there.
Someone might be actually listening.
Where is our callers this year?
I don't know.
Inundated, but are you sure we're broadcasting?
We are.
I know you're new in this position.
I haven't done this very long. When you were talking, I double-checked, actually, the air monitor to make sure we are on, so I will remind our listeners.
We listen to see if we're being listened to.
814-451-1400 if you have a question for Josh. And I can't believe that nobody has a question for you right now.
That's all right.
Because this would be the perfect time.
I'll lecture you.
Ask you stuff. Well, let me tell you something that happened this morning on my other job over at Rocket. We were talking about a TikTok video, and don't spoil it because I know you know. Yeah. But I was proud to know, too.
If it's on TikTok, I definitely don't know.
Well, you know it's wrong is what I'm telling you. Oh. So there's this TikTok video where this woman is saying, hey, with peppers, the number of bumps on the bottom determines whether it's a male or female pepper. And that, you should only use the male ones for this and the female ones for that. And we were talking about it, and I said, look, let me go back to my FFA days. Pepper plants have the male and female parts. There's no male or female pepper. It's just a pepper. So the number of bumps has nothing to do with whether you should use it to make stuffed peppers or to, whatever. It's just a pepper.
If you watch news on politics, you'll know that nothing on the internet is true.
Nothing is.
It's all just a blatant lie.
I was like, come on.
So there is vocabulary that sometimes I struggle with to always pronounce right. And a plant that has both genders, that is what in the nomenclature we just call self-fertile.
Self-fertile, yes.
I'm pretty sure is dioecious. So it has.
I like that.
It has the meaning it has both the ability to be fertile and be fertilized on the same plant. So that is a pepper, although we can go down a rabbit hole here. Things like blueberries and peppers, they do best planted in rows and amongst themselves. So even though they have the ability, so imagine you see a row of peppers or a row of blueberries, and you would plant one of those peppers, and at any given time, that pepper has, say, 6 blooms on it. What if the 6 blooms were, by coincidence, just by Mother Nature, either all one gender or one female and a whole bunch of male? You're only going to get one pepper.
Right.
So are you following kind of the mentality here?
I see what you're saying.
So when you put, say, 6 peppers together and all 6 peppers in that row cast by bees, wind, caterpillars, moths, whatever is helping to fertilize that plant, now because you have 6 plants together and they're all blooming at a similar time, this plant has 5 or 6 female and the other plant has 5 or 6 male, you get a much better crop. So the person that generally or in the past has planted one pepper in one pot and said, I really don't get that many peppers. I give up on peppers. Sometimes I can simply say, well, if you plant like 4 pots and put them all somewhat close together, then your pepper crop will get way better. And blueberries are a really good example of that. Are they? If I'm saying the word right, I'm sure maybe someone will call in to correct me.
Yeah, we actually have a caller.
Whoa.
Do you want to?
It was the rant where we didn't. Yeah. We weren't sure we were going out there.
Let's take our caller. We'll return to the pepper conversation. I promise. You're on the air with Josh. Good morning.
I will tell you this: every time you're on the air with any guest, your volume on the radio is very low. And
my
when you
volume's
come
low.
off the air and it goes to regular programming, like Glenn Beck or anybody else, the volume goes up.
Well, I'm going to crank up our levels in the studio, and hopefully that will help. I was not aware of that, and without listeners, I wouldn't know. So thank you.
So I'm just letting you know it's very hard unless we really crank up our radio here. We can barely hear you on our end. And every time you guys go off air without a guest, it goes to normal volume.
When it goes to automation. Okay, that's very good. I appreciate that word there. We'll definitely boost our signal and work on that.
Or have an engineer take a look at it.
Oh, definitely. I'm not going to fix it. I can tell you that. I don't know how.
So now we know.
Now we know. Thank you, caller. Appreciate that.
So there are plenty of people listening, just they can't hear.
That's right. Let's try another caller. You're on with Josh. Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
We're doing okay.
That's good. That's good to hear. I'm just getting up now. What are you guys talking about this morning? Enlighten me, please. Talk to me. I want to get involved with the conversation. I got a lot to talk about, especially with these immigrants coming in our country.
Well, we're talking about peppers, so you are on the wrong radio station. Now, here's another thing but since we were talking about peppers, and I'll show off a little bit of my knowledge. So, yes, even though you might want to have several pepper plants which can cross-pollinate, even though they are self-fertilizing.
Did the plants immigrate?
Maybe. I think the Hungarian peppers did. And the Thai chili peppers. So even though you still, when it comes to the pepper itself, it does not have a gender because, correct me if I'm wrong, it is a fruit with a seed-bearing structure.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then some of those. Well, it's already been pollinated. It's already produced. So here's another one. We're going down a whole lot of rabbit holes. If it's an F1 hybrid, now that hybrid does not necessarily produce the same seed inside that pepper. We're going down that pollinated direction. Right. Once that pepper is it comes to fruition, and you have seeds inside of it, and the seeds age to a point where they would be able to germinate, that plant or that seed may not be what the original plant was. So you can get a plant to grow, but once that plant grows, it doesn't necessarily produce what plant you had.
It came from. Okay.
So say you mentioned Hungarian hot wax. So if you save the seed from that Hungarian hot wax being an F1 hybrid, it is a compilation of a group of plants put together. That's not a GMO. It's totally different. But the that plant, being the Hungarian hot wax, will not produce a Hungarian hot wax seed. It will produce a viable seed. You'll get a pepper out of it, but you don't know what that is. It can't be reproduced. That's where the value or the draw to heirloom is. You can save that seed, that heirloom, unless it's pollinated by another close by tomato plant or pepper plant, whatever it is. Heirloom is open air pollinated. It means it can be repeated. It can be pollinated by another flower on the same plant, and it will produce, like, say, purple stripe. Purple stripe tomato produces more purple stripe tomato seeds. That's what an heirloom is. So F1 hybrid, if you're trying to save seeds, and you're like, this isn't what I got. That's typical. That plant will pull genetics from one of its parents, and it could be something that you've never seen before. You could actually get a red pepper out of a yellow plant because that's what the parentage was.
Interesting. Let's see if we can grab another caller. You're on with Josh. Good morning.
Yeah, am I in the air?
Yeah, you are.
Okay, Josh, I'm going to kind of get off of the pepper issue. You've heard of pop-up plant trees, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any areas in Erie where they grow them? I mean, commercially they're very difficult to grow because they have a very short ripening time, and you really can't sell them in stores because they don't last very long. But I just was curious. This is a great area for pawpaws, but do you know any places in town that have actual pawpaw trees that are growing?
I think about 3 weeks ago we had this conversation a little bit. We talked about pawpaw, and it is a native plant that you can just walk into the woods and find. But that being said, I don't. The one area of pawpaw that I know of is in Columbus, that they have a whole grove that's right outside the edge of their arboretum by campus. So there's, and it's really neat. I told a story about how I was walking with my wife. I'm like, hey, look, try this fruit. She's like, what? And she's like, I've never seen anything like this. And we talked about on air about how it's a cross between, like, I don't know, a banana and a custard and vanilla and a pear. Yeah. Like, it's all this meld. But no, caller, it's interesting. I can't rattle off I almost wonder, I have a good relationship with the folks at Frontier Park. I almost wonder whether they have bothered started any groves in Frontier Park. Have you looked there?
Well, I'll tell you, I have a condo down off of 6th Street by Peninsula Drive, and that's Scott Park, which everybody knows about. And there is a couple pawpaw trees that are wild that I found. They're in a area where there's a creek. They like a moist environment, and these are young trees, and I know exactly what the leaves look like. They're very narrow at the stem, and then they get wide at the end. And these are pawpaws. I know they are. And I looked for fruits on them, and there's nothing, but they're just growing, and they're right in the area overlooking the bay, and there's like 3 of them. I found them, and when I walked there, and of course I collect mushrooms and stuff, edible mushrooms, wild mushrooms, but I was looking for pawpaws, and that's the only place that I've known that have them, around here, and
so
I was just curious.
I got to ask you, did the conversation on gender and dioecious plants and did the pawpaw come to mind? Is that what, are you educated in the fact that pawpaws typically in the wild grow in a grove together because they're not dioecious? Generally in the wild, you have a male plant and a female plant, so you'll find Mother Nature has found a way to grow them in a grove or a patch together, where the pawpaw falls to the ground and it germinates another one because each plant generally isn't. So I got a little news for you. They've worked on that commercially, and I don't know honestly because it's a very kind of specific niche kind of plant, whether we have any in stock now. But commercially, you will find pawpaws that they have created that have both genders on the plant so that you can plant one at your house and hopefully get fruit. In Mother Nature, those 2 plants have specific genders, like the holly plant. You have, blue girl and blue boy, or blue prince and blue princess. That is the same in the pawpaw plant. Commercially, kind of keep your ears open. If you go to garden centers, look around, you may find a dioecious plant. I'm not sure whether they weed them out specifically or whether they grafted them to do both. I don't recall that, but I know commercially.
I watched the thing on YouTube where they actually grafted them. They had a regular structure that they grafted it to, and that's how they grew them commercially. And it was in Ohio. Ohio's a really big area. I couldn't believe it. But, it was pretty interesting. I've eaten pawpaw. They're amazing. They taste like a cross between – they look like a mango, but they taste like custard. And I freeze them, and it's like frozen custard. They're really sweet and good.
Freeze it. See, I want to order some because I am so anxious to try them, and I know I can't wander out in the woods and find some.
Now I'm going to have to keep my eyes open. So next time, if I go somewhere, which is slim, the chances are slim
to none.
If I actually get out into the real world, when you have a garden center in the spring and a 3-year-old, there's no.
You're busy.
Yeah,
you're busy. You got a lot going on.
When I'm out somewhere, keep listening to the show, caller. If I see a grove of natural pawpaw, unless it's on Alan's backyard, because his wife will yell at me, I'll let you know where it is. If I find one other than on Scott Park, I'll let you know where it is, because I don't off the cuff know where you can find an area just of native, although they are a native plant.
When I pick leeks in the spring, I always look in areas where I pick the leeks for pawpaws, and I haven't found it. I got a lot of fiddlehead ferns that I eat in the spring and leeks, but I was looking for pawpaws and I couldn't find anything. And that was down by Wattsburg, south of 90. That's where I was getting my leaks.
That's where Alan picks his cow slip.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Hey, just real quick before I go, over in Northeast off of Route 20, where the old Paschke Mums farm, there was an outside stand. They sell juices and jams and stuff. Behind that building, there is a huge persimmon tree. I found it about 5 years ago when I was shopping there, and I said to the lady, I said, "That's a persimmon tree." She says, "Yeah." I couldn't believe it. It was and the thing's huge, and there's fruit on it all the time. It's amazing.
Wow.
You know, Cole, that's funny because I've literally been doing this for decades now. When the time went by that Paschke Mums was not really doing the field mum thing anymore, Stan's actually operated that facility for about 3 seasons. We did a Northeast pop-up, and I know exactly what tree you're talking about. So when you chat with people and you're like, "Hey, do you know Alan Carpenter?" Like, "Oh, I know Alan. Yeah, I saw him at the spelling bee. He can't spell worth." Yeah. When you talk about people, now you and I are talking about a tree. We're probably rare breed. The fact that we know about one specific tree in one specific area, but because we operated that facility for a number of years, I know exactly what persimmon tree you're talking about.
You know where it's right behind the building, and I went there and I said to the lady, I said, "Can I get some?" She says, "Yeah, I don't care." And the best time to eat them is after a frost. That's when they get sweet, and they were beautiful. They were huge. They were amazing. I thought I was down in Florida. It was a really neat thing.
Yeah, it is.
It was
cool.
really cool.
Yeah, that's why we should just plant more trees because they're so neat. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, nice talking to you. You do a great job. You guys are amazing.
Thanks,
and Alan. You have a great show.
Thank you, caller. Appreciate that very much.
Okay. Have a good day. Yep. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
We opened a can of worms, Alan. We had callers.
I know we did.
That's because they can hear us now.
Well, yes, and it proves that if you want something in life, you just beg for it.
Persimmon tree.
We've got about 2 minutes left. Remind us again what the hours for Stan's are, both locations, and I know you guys have tons of good stuff.
Putting me on the spot now because we're gonna shift that, so I got to think about that right now. For this weekend, through this weekend, we are still 8 to 8 until Sunday is 10 to 6 or 9 to 6 still. Then Come Monday, we're going to go right to 9 to 6 back. We're going to kind of whittle back those hours a little bit, keep our staff able to stay upright. Yeah. So starting Monday, we'll go to 9 to 6. So watch for that hours change. The hours will be the same at both locations. So 8 to 8 today, 9 to 6 on Sunday, and then 9 to 6 right through next Saturday. The following Sunday, we'll go to 11 to 4. So we'll go back to those summer hours as the hours have gotten a little long.
Yeah, I bet they have. Well, you have yourself a good Father's Day.
Hey, thanks for putting the volume on, Alan.
Yeah, I appreciate that as well. Hey, somebody can actually hear us now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a good Father's Day.
You too, buddy.
Hard-working dude.